Andy, Adam, thank you so much for coming in to discuss a topic we actually have not touched on in a couple of years of doing the Sports Agents almost. So how big is the problem, Adam?
It's a big issue. It's, I suppose it's how you look at it. You know, consumers love the fact that they have lots of different options now, and you know the direction of travel towards illegal streaming is worrying for the industry. The industry themselves are worried, but they don't necessarily want to talk about it too much, because then that will feed into people thinking, right, well, they're really worried about it, it must be a big thing. So
quantify it then in terms of how many streams are being watched illegally, how much that's costing.
Well, in terms of what the Premier League did just last year, they shut down or blocked 600,000 different illegal streams, and those are the ones that they could find and identify and actually shut down.
How are they doing that, and how much is that costing them?
Well, that's the question. They're spending millions of pounds to basically play a whack-a-mole game to try and stop one, but then 5 more will pop up elsewhere. Internationally, because we looked at this sort of globally, the amount of money that's being lost to piracy, and that's why it's being called an existential threat, is, according to the Motion Picture Association, who have sort of waged a decades-long war against piracy, is $28 billion. So that's what they know.
On Premier League football?
On sports streaming.
Right, okay,
yeah.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, for the Premier League, that certainly would be existential, exactly. But in terms of sort of global sports piracy,
right, okay.
then that's the amount that is out there.
Okay, so this is, I think we could say, huge in terms of the money that is leaving legally, if you like. And you can't say that everybody who's illegal streaming would necessarily, if it was a crime that was treated very, very seriously, would then buy the streams. But clearly a lot of them would. And there's lots of other arguments as to why nobody really wants to get involved in this. So should we address a couple of those, do you think, Andy, in terms of, as a crime, how easy this is to crack down on, and is there any desire to do so?
Well, this is it. I think the really tricky thing for the authorities when it comes to something like this, and what the police and authorities are always thinking about, are, do they have the support of the public? Now, with something like this has always been called a victimless crime, and they're constantly fighting against this Robin Hood mentality, right? Robbing from the rich, giving to the poor. So when you ask police officers, in the authorities who actually crack down on this, you've got the National Crime Agency and you've got the City of London Police. They have this own intellectual property unit which track down these illegal streamers. Where it gets murky is where, in recent years, the organised criminal gangs, they've actually got involved in this. Just like any other crime, if it starts to make money, the organised crime groups will say, right, we want part of that. And then how they kind of run it really is in a way, it's kind of like a drug operation where you've got the head honchos, you've got the people who are bulk buying, wholesaling, and then they have, in the drugs operation, they will have the drug dealers. But in piracy, they will have the resellers. So
people have a job to sell,
yes,
like they would sell drugs.
Yeah, basically, yes. But these people who are doing the reselling, they're probably not. They probably don't know that they're part of an organised crime operation, and this is where it gets murky. And then if you ask Joe Bloggs on the street, someone who just wants cheap football or cheap movies, do you think? And if you ask them, do you want the police cracking down on that? They will say no, because they just want the cheap. So
they're
cheap
buying
content.
a Fire Stick or something like that.
Well, it's not. You don't necessarily need hardware now, because, and it's worth pointing out that the Fire Stick has become a sort of a catch-all phrase for any device that you plug into your TV, and obviously it's come from Amazon, but it's not the actual hardware. It's the apps that are loaded onto the hardware. I mean, in terms of the resellers, that's really interesting, because I was sort of keen to find out about the culture, but also the criminal side of things. And it's very easy to actually not only buy the app and get the code to give you your service, but actually to become part of a criminal network. It's very, very easy, and that's what I was able to ultimately get to the cusp of doing, because some of these organisations are running themselves in a very sort of polished way, and they are giving people an opportunity to become a reseller, and you can do that very, very easily. And I hate to promote it, but it just shows how easy it is for the industry
when
to
you
grow.
say a reseller, so the app, for example,
Yeah.
somebody's developing the app, so they're involved in criminal activity.
Yeah.
And then obviously, maybe unknowingly, and then that technology is then what? Is it like a kind of there's a shelf and you can pick off which one you want to buy? Is it?
Yeah, I mean, most of the platforms are platforms whereby you can watch all of the sports all of the time, and it will also
That sounds like
come.
a catchphrase for a channel. I can't.
Yeah, sounds quite good. But also you will get films and series and all that sort of stuff that comes with it. But in terms of the actual transaction, all it is going online and contacting a WhatsApp number that is very freely available, getting a code, downloading an app onto your Fire Stick, and then away you go. And then there will be a transaction of maybe, 60 quid for the year rather than a month. In terms of the resellers, they get hold of a load of codes. You can buy the codes and then you sell them on for a profit. So you can buy them for £20 and then you'll sell them for 60. So you make a £40 profit. So, that's the sort of the levels of
And
it.
of course,
it's
that'll
like
be all cash, presumably, as well, those kinds of transactions generally.
not
So
necessarily.
then they're easy to trace.
Yes, and that's the point, that there is also, there's digital breadcrumbs, as the people in the industry say, and a footprint. And above that, as you go further above it, then there's the sort of big amounts of crypto that are part of the organised crime networks and the money laundering and all that.
So let's go deep into a bit of that, should we? Because it's a bit like drugs on the high street, isn't it? When people think they're on a Saturday night kind of, having a recreational experience.
Yeah.
As we all know, if we watch Narcos or anything like that, behind that, is a trail of crime that leads back to some pretty horrible, tawdry stuff. Are we comparing?
Yeah,
this
I mean,
with that?
I think it's a bit more complex than that in terms of, I think there's obviously organised criminality involved in this, but actually, I assume, and you probably back me up on this, quite a lot of the people who are doing this and making a lot of money from this aren't really criminals. They're just people who, well, they're technically they are, but they will not be seen by society as criminals. For example, there was a guy jailed just earlier this year. He actually made £1 million off it, but he had no links to organised criminality or anything. He was just a bloke who spotted an opportunity, bit of a tech geek, and thought, oh, there's a loophole here, I'm going to make some money. That backfired when he got arrested and jailed for 3 years. But there's the other more sinister element where the organised...
But just on that,
go on.
he must have known he's making money selling stuff to people,
Yeah,
so
of
they
course.
didn't have to buy the products, right?
Yeah. But the point I was making is he didn't have any links to proper organised
Right, okay.
criminality. He
He
didn't have a
wasn't- he wasn't washing money.
of criminality. Yes. So where it becomes sinister is when the organised crime groups become involved, because they are making this money, just say like this bloke did, £1 million in a year. And then, but that money is then being used for serious criminality, such as drug trafficking, human trafficking, money laundering. And really, it's these groups that the police want to go after.
And how serious is that? I mean, how
Well,
big
that's
is
very
that?
serious, yeah.
I mean, obviously the crime's serious,
Yeah.
but how serious a problem? How big is that problem? I probably should have asked.
Yeah, I mean, this is just one element. This is just one slice of the pie that organised crime groups will be involved in. They've got hundreds of these different types of operations that feed into their wider operation that they can then buy drugs with, human trafficking, and then really that kind of fuels their real criminality. So on the face of it, piracy, is this a crime? Victimless crime. People are saying, actually, this money can be used, that you're paying for, can be used for serious crime. A lot of people don't know that. And also, but it's not in the... People don't see it that way because they're not... They don't care. People just want cheap
Well, a lot of people would
games.
be completely unaware, I
And
think, of
some
that.
people, a lot of people can't afford to pay for a Sky subscription, so they will see an opportunity to watch their team on a Saturday at 3 p.m.
Well, let's get a bit further into that, because that's what you've looked into and you spoke to fans. Why do they do it?
It's pretty simple, really. The cost is first of all, the contrast between getting an illegal service for £60 a year rather than £60 a month is quite clear. The convenience, not having to get multiple subscriptions, the frustration of trying to track down exactly where you can watch a certain game. If you know you've got one place where you can watch all of them, then bingo. In terms of
the quality of what you're watching, and
yeah,
in terms of presentation and what's going on around it, what are they actually seeing?
Well, on the whole, they're seeing what they would see if they had a legitimate subscription.
They're
However,
the commentary and
they might not be hearing the commentary in their language all in their own language all of the time. For example, during the documentary, I went and watched an illegal stream of someone that I know, accessed, was able to watch it, and it was very clear that the feeds were coming from multiple different countries due to the graphics that you could see on the screens. So the convenience of having everything there, that you can go, right, if a game's on, I'm going to go and watch it, whatever level and wherever it is. But also one of the big elements as well is the 3 p.m. blackout. And a lot of people, because they can't watch that game, they know they can't watch that game at 3 p.m, then they want the optionality to be able to do that. And those are the three main reasons why they do it. And
presumably they would say they can't watch the game on TV, but also they can't go to the game because obviously, as we know, almost every Premier League game is sold out and they can't get tickets.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons as well. I think it all feeds into a frustration that fans...
I'm talking about fans here, sorry, obviously not around.
Yeah, I think that a frustration for fans sort of being priced out of a lot of elements of it. And previously I did a documentary with the same prefix, The Underground World of Fake Football Shirts. So it's sort of a similar theme, but this one, because it's all connected to media rights, which underpin the finances of football, it feels, and why people use words like existential, because if you have to recalibrate the finances behind all of this due to piracy, then there might need to be a bit of a change in terms of how things are funded. Maybe the players might need to take a cut of their wages. Shock horror. That would be really harsh for them to sort of halve from 500 grand.
So piracy could be the needle that bursts the bubble, potentially.
Well, look, there's people within the game, broadcast side, league side, that will say, "Oh, it's not as bad as this. We've got a handle on it, and we're planning for the future." But ultimately, if the direction of travel continues away from legitimate streams and the funding stops, and broadcasters say, "Well, hang on a minute, why are we paying all of this money?" Then it's gonna lead to it. It happened in the music industry, and when I say it lead to it, it's the bubble's going to burst. Maybe the bubble could just sort of deflate a little bit. It doesn't need to be quite so.
What about the Jeff Stelling argument? You used a clip of him on your podcast from TalkSport, arguing that this would kill giving 3:00 kickoffs. That if this is one way around it, if every game potentially was available to view, and you didn't have, I think it's gone down from 63% to 36% or something like that.
Yes. Start
3:00 kickoffs.
92, 93, exactly. Yeah, 66% down to 33 last season.
Right.
So it shows that they've moved as many games outside, so they can exploit them.
Got rid of that and 3:00 were shown. His argument, and a lot of people's argument, would be that you'd lose out lower down the football pyramid effectively, and people just wouldn't bother going to watch League Two matches if they knew that Manchester United Man City was on at 3:00.
Yeah, and I think until you do it, then you won't know, and then that's obviously the risk factor. But I think that when it was brought in and when it was first thought up back in the 60s, it's a completely different time. When it was first used in the 80s, a different time altogether. Consumers now, they're more nimble online. You want to be able to watch the game when you can. And yet there might be a bit of a hit on crowds at a lower level. But at the same time, crowds at a lower level and, further down the pyramid, National League and even further down, they're strong at the moment. And the EFL figures are strong as well. And there is currently options for you to watch those 3 p.m. games technically, legally in the EFL, because they have blackout games available via their international rights, which some people might use a VPN to access and things like that. So there is already the option to watch some of these games, and the health of the attendances is pretty strong at the moment. So yes, there's a risk. It is a stick that's used to beat the argument. But all the movements of the industry are, let's move as many games away from 3 p.m. And the threshold for actually having the blackout hasn't been met.
No, I've having done Match of the Day now for a couple of months, I've noticed, kind of up close, just how few games are at 3 o'clock. We sometimes have just two on a Saturday, and how many games are now moving towards 8 o'clock kickoffs on a Saturday night, which is a nightmare for a Match of the Day edit going out at 10:30 when you've got a game that sometimes doesn't finish when you're in the studio ready to go. But that's our we'll deal with that. That's our problem. So that also creates societal issues. 8 o'clock for me is really antisocial. If I'm a football fan, and you've got family time at weekends, and you've got police considerations as well, because I imagine they're not cheap, are they? On a Saturday night, the police at 8 o'clock. So for clubs, obviously having to, the police and the clubs obviously do deals, don't they, in terms of the costs of policing? But how does that work then?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's something like the Met alone is spending about 70 million quid a year just on policing football matches in London. And that's just one force. I mean, obviously, it's the biggest force and the highest.
And the clubs
concentration
contribute what towards that?
Well, I don't know. All I know is how much the police are paying for that. And the police are actually now saying, given the world that we live in, and the police are constantly saying we need more money to do the job that we need. They're saying, why are we spending all this money when you have these, multi-billionaire owners who should be paying more for this?
They have a point.
They definitely have a point. I mean, it's if you speak to Sir Mark Rowley, the Commissioner of the Met, it's one of his big gripes. He's always moaning about it. He's always going on about it. And yeah, I mean, it's fair enough.
It does. It seems a kind of no-brainer really for in terms of pressure from the police to say. Yeah, I mean
we're at a situation now where the police are really struggling. The Met alone are now cutting numbers, huge numbers, and they're now there's talk of cutting like these historic, legendary units like the Flying Squad who go after armed robbers. I mean they've managed to survive for now, but how long is that going to continue if the police are continually having to pay this amount of money to police these football matches?
Okay, so all roads seem to, when you look at solutions to this, lead to Premflix, a streaming service that the Premier League effectively own, gatekeep. They've got everything under one roof, all Premier League football.
Yeah.
How feasible is that, and what kinds of issues and problems would that kind of send around the media landscape?
Well, I think sort of to try and simplify it as best as possible, and we try to do that in the documentary, is to basically say that they would need to replace their traditional broadcast revenue coming from Sky or TNT with subscriber revenue and go into quite a fluctuating environment. So already you're starting to feel that if they did that, that's risky, and football clubs and leagues don't like the risk because they have these solid partnerships with broadcasters that feed in millions and millions of pounds, billions of pounds per season. So it's
the Premier League would have to replace 1.6 billion.
1.6 billion is the amount of money that they get per season from their UK broadcast rights. So they do have other...
But then they'd need more cash than that to put the stuff on, wouldn't they? Because
of course.
When Sky buy those rights, it then costs them another few million, to put those things on.
Yeah, I mean, Sky would also, they get their advertising revenue in as well. But yeah, absolutely. The Premier League would have to cover the expenses ultimately. And just doing sort of quite mundane things, but things that are actually important. The Premier League would need to have its own customer service arm, which is something that they don't have. All the broadcasters, Sky, they take the calls, they deal with the complaints, they put the satellite dishes more in the olden days than now, but on the rooftops, they do all of that. The Premier League don't have to worry about that, and they sort of, they hire it out ultimately. So that's something that they would need to do, but it centres on whether they have a desire to do it, whether they're willing to maybe recalibrate the finances, and how that would be met by the clubs. And ultimately, the clubs who are part of the Premier League, they want to keep going at a good thing and keep the money coming in, because all of their finances are pinned around the central payments that they get, and all of their wages are pinned to that as well. So you can't just change it in an instant and go, this season you're getting this, next season you're going to be getting half as much. Because all the clubs will say, we're not going to do that. It's not going to work for us. So that's why it is so difficult for there to be a big change made. But at the end of the day, the fans would like it. The fans would love it. To be able to go to one place. However, as a little kicker at the end, yes, it would be great for everyone to be to be able to watch Premier League football as and when they want it. It would need to have more optionality and all that sort of stuff. But then that's only Premier League football. So if you want to watch Champions League football, you're still going to need to get another subscription. So it doesn't necessarily...
Also, if you had a landscape where there was no TNT, effectively Sky's business model has been built on Premier League football. You know, what happens to them and other streamers? You think about all the other sports that they are able to show because, you know, they have the viewers coming in for Premier League football, which helps them to put those other sports on. It does kind of leave a worrying kind of proposition for those sports, doesn't it, about where they're going to be shown and how their rights are going to be valued.
Yeah, and I think it also feeds into the fact that how the bigger tech giants, Apple, you know, Amazon, Netflix, etc., how they approach the proposition of sport as well, and bundling things together, and, you know, wanting to have the big game and being able to sell that well around a big event like, you know, Black Friday or Christmas or whatever. So it sort of changes the landscape. It also potentially changes the landscape of normal competitions. Do we need a full pyramid if, you know, we're not getting as much in and all that sort of stuff? So that's why the can on this seems to be kicked down the road quite often.
Well,
and
2029 isn't that far away, and that's when the next tranche of Premier League rights come up for grabs. It doesn't seem that far away, does it, for this to still be something that's not, you know, not really being talked about? Do you feel like this conversation is going to be amplified over the next few years, and there could be a seismic change in the way we view Premier League football?
I think that the noise will carry on. I think that internally the Premier League will probably be thinking, well, we can probably go another rights cycle, potentially. I don't know that for fact, but, you know, Richard Masters spoke recently at a conference that I was at, and he said, one, on the 3 p.m. blackout, I don't see that changing for the foreseeable future. I mean, that may well be the foreseeable being 2029. But on the other issues, in terms of, you know, a switch on off moment to a new Premflix platform, he doesn't necessarily see that happening, you know, straight away, and it'll become almost like a mixed model, so that they will start to, you know, continue to work with broadcasters that have a streaming platform like Sky have now, or you know, Peacock in the States and things like that. So I think the demands will continue. It's just whether the Premier League feel, via their UK rights but also their overseas rights, which are still going up, whether they can still keep it going.
And the other potential possibility is, and noise has been kind of heard around this, is that a nation state buys all the rights. You know, would Saudi Arabia ever in our lifetimes ever own Premier League football as a country to come in and buy the whole thing?
They already own the best football team in the Premier League anyway, Gabby, don't they? But you're cornered by two Newcastle fans here.
Yeah, well, I mean, there are signs, you know, that they have a strong relationship with DAZN. They invested in DAZN. That ultimately ended up with the Club World Cup, which, okay, it was only a 4-week tournament or whatever, but it was a big hefty thing, being shown around the world free to air. So it does show that you can have funding on the back end, which can help the consumer, and that may well please certain people for a reason. But, you know, you also then have all the other complexities around that, and, you know, there are other options. You could have like a premium sponsor behind it, and they would get the exposure, and that could take some of the cost away from the consumer. And I hate to sort of promote someone like Gianni Infantino, for example, who has got his own sort of there's critical analysis around him, being very diplomatic. But you need someone to do something significant, and he doesn't necessarily mind doing that. Whether that's popular or not, right or not, that's up for debate. But, you know, Saudi making big moves, we end up with a World Cup there. Qatar, we end up with a World Cup there. Changing things around, having new competitions. You need something big to happen. The Super League was panned for being too big, too bold, too brash. But it was a change, and it does show that big clubs, big leagues can do things.
Yeah, but what happened there, which was really interesting, was fan power.
Yeah.
And I think that this is, when thinking about behaviours and behavioural science, that's what changes things, isn't it? If you have enough people, and all that noise in 2020 when we went back to Premier League football with no crowds and everybody, without fans, football's nothing. It is just 22 people on a pitch kicking a ball around. It's the fans who make this something worth watching. So fan power and changing behaviours is possibly, and I don't mean that, pressure and telling everybody that organised crime's behind their streaming, but is that a way that they should be using kind of fans to try and put pressure on behaviour, do you think?
Well, I'll tell you what I found interesting about this is the whole language that the authorities are talking about, because usually when you talk about crime, you hear the authorities saying, we will catch you, we will put you in jail. What they're saying about streaming, illegal streaming, is, listen, your data could be nicked. They're not really saying, listen, we're going to come after you. They're saying you could be arrested. It's very different language from a normal crime, which is you will be arrested and we will find you. So the language by the authorities is completely different. So that kind of gives you an inkling about what they really think about it. And, I was talking to your producer just before, and we were talking about, I spoke to a detective who works in the NCA. And he doesn't work in that unit. And he said, put it this way, you don't join the NCA to go after legal streamers. You join the NCA to go after organised crime, drug traffickers. That's why you go there. So there will be this sense of the cops who are working on this unit, they didn't join the police for that purpose. This may be a stepping stone to get to a more serious level of policing. But this is not why they joined the job. That's what he told me.
Okay, thank you both very much. It's a fascinating area, and it feels like one as these rights come up in 2029. The conversation about 3 p.m. kickoffs and streaming is definitely one we're going to touch on again. Adam's documentary podcast, The Underground World of Illegal Streaming, is available now wherever you get your pods.
The Sports Agents
with Gabby Logan and Mark Chapman.